My name is Nico Steves. Podcasts this summer season will run 15 minutes each in a re-release of my first book, The Constant Procession, the history of the Virgin Mary since she passed on. I'd like to thank you for spreading the word about my new book, The Very Fine Light, which is available in the ebook format on Amazon.com. For the next couple of months, I'll be finishing up the audiobook version and also releasing a version in the printed form. This summer I'll also be traveling to complete research for my next book, and I will be bringing you a few reports from the field about this upcoming book as research and interviews reach fruition. And so, please keep checking my website, nicosteves.com, as I will be posting blog updates from time to time during my summer research adventure. By the way, keep me posted on what you're up to in the comments section of my website or via email at nicosteves@gmail.com. And please keep praying and supporting the people of Ukraine. I have listed some links to Ukrainian organizations at constantprocession.com who you can contact for ways to help. And now enjoy installment 5 of The Constant Procession. Still another example of challenged human leadership when political leaders and church officials are too intertwined is during the Middle Ages with Joan of Arc's experience in Europe at the end of the 100 Years' War between France and England in the first part of the 1400s. However, though her vision, she sees St. Michael, St. Catherine, and St. Margaret rather than the Virgin Mary, she held fast till her dying hour to pledge her faith to service to God and the Blessed Holy Virgin. Joan of Arc in 1431, at the tender age of 19, had been imprisoned and burned at the stake for heresies against the Church. As she burned, she called out loud to God to forgive them of their sins and told the priests there to offer a mass for her. Joan of Arc had seen these saints apparate 7 years before. They influenced her chosen path. Joan of Arc inspired the French people and led them onto the battlefield, breaking the stalemate of the 100 Years' War between England and France. At an age when most young women of today are becoming college co-eds, and in an age where women answered to their husbands, Joan took over an army, which she led to victory, had the power to install a king, all the while insisting on her soldiers to prepare for battle by going to confession and taking communion before each battle. After installing the king, her goal had been to go back home. The king asked Joan to continue to fight on, saying she, quote, heard the voices no more, unquote. She just wanted to go back to Arc, to her mother and father. But she yielded to the king's request. Joan of Arc got captured and given over to the English. Once they had her, they put her on public trial for heresy. The English had their religious leaders entrap this young country bumpkin on theological doctrine, forcing her to testify against herself, demanding her to specify whom she maintained her allegiance to. The choices, quote, God in heaven or his leaders on earth, unquote. Her choice cost her her life. So these Christian leaders burned her at the stake. Religious leaders had to change, and they came back to the roots of Christianity, refocused to actions that followed a more Christ-like, God-fearing approach. As part of this return came an admission of wrongdoing by the Church and recognition of the good works of Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc gained sainthood also. Chapter 10, Ocean Sage. 1492 holds two major events of international history: the reconquest of Spain or the Iberian Peninsula from the Moors by the Roman Catholic kings, and, as in the children's nursery rhyme, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Though many scholars recognize Norsemen as having discovered America and tend to diminish the importance and value of Christopher Columbus's achievements, it is wrong to discount the raw courage, sheer willpower, and unlimited faith of this man and his part in the exploration and establishment of bases in the New World. In those days before modern technology, before the modern engine, outside of drifting at the mercy of the currents, the two other ways to move a ship would be by physical exertion of men using oars, or the skillful manipulation of sails to capture and control the wind for power. In spite of these limitations, Columbus took not one, but 4 successful trips to the Americas in that era. There are, however, still similarities between then and now. Obtaining the money to fund new and untried projects is a most difficult task. The actual financial provisions for the first of these voyages shared this common reality. And like today, Columbus worked with limited funds on his first exploratory voyage. To stretch his funds, he did not use the latest or best ships. He did not have the state-of-the-art type vessels for voyage. Today, people forget such facts and assume he had the latest and best technology for such a journey into the unknown. So like with contemporary space travel, you would expect Columbus would have the best technology money could buy. Not on this voyage. Columbus had used ships, and his ships had designs more of a cargo type, not intended to sail on open waters of the ocean. Why? Before success, Columbus had endured rejection upon rejection, country after country. He could not find sponsors to underwrite this audacious theory that an ocean course in the opposite direction would get one to India. And so, just before his financial achievement, a dejected Columbus found himself at the end of the line after being rejected all across Europe. Not sure what to do, he finds himself once more in Spain. Yes, he had already hit up the Spanish crown, and they had refused him. But Columbus believed in the Virgin Mary. So he traveled to the Extremadura mountain shrine, to the monastery where the apparition of Gil Cadero had uncovered the Black Madonna icon so long before. Columbus went there to Our Lady of Guadalupe Royal Monastery to pray for direction. The monks who lived in the monastery learned of Columbus's plight. Queen Isabella of Spain, along with her husband King Ferdinand, had also been in direct association with the monks at this shrine. The monks arranged for one more audience for Columbus with the Queen. In this, his last-ditch effort to find funding for his proposed exploration of that new trade route to India, he received a final chance to convince the Crown of the value to be found in funding his voyage. The Queen prays for guidance at the icon of the Black Madonna. The King and Queen of Spain approved and helped fund the voyage. Once they made the discovery of this new world, it must be remembered that, like the astronauts going to the moon, they still had to get back home. It also needs to be remembered they had to provide for themselves the restocking of food and water necessary for the long trip back. This return trip would be much more difficult. The supplies they gathered while in the New World dwindled at a faster rate. The crew survived a hurricane, and once past this storm, they saw a growing new storm threat. As they gathered that evening, Columbus asked the crew to pledge to make pilgrimages to churches and Marian shrines across Europe, should they be successful in getting back to Spain. After praying to Santa Maria, they start drawing lots to determine which site each would go to. Seldom realized is that Columbus drew the lot for returning to the same shrine at Guadalupe, Spain. The accolades given to Christopher Columbus must have been overwhelming at their successful return. Many people tend to forget their pledges in such a state of recognition. Columbus, however, held true to his word. He makes the pilgrimage back to the Black Madonna of Guadalupe and kneels in prayer of thanksgiving. Chapter 11, Upside Down. In the period of the next 40 years, Europe is undergoing dramatic changes in the Christian landscape. More denominations are formed, which reduce the active size of the Roman Catholic Church. In the New World, at the same time, some practices that have been dividing the Church in Europe are still being used to help establish, quote, European societies, unquote, in the New World, and this is where Columbus falls short as a brutal administrator of the lands he claimed. Also, it needs to be remembered that in those days of New World exploration, many of the rank and file tended to be fortune hunters. The nature and mindset of these Europeans tended to be very aggressive. In general, their passions differed from their fellow countrymen. Conquistadors who rejected the peaceful nature of Christ's example with a more self-centered approach, with a focus on selfish seeking to find their personal fortunes in the naive but still common belief that lots of money is the secret to the good life. The conquistadors followed this motivation. They would seek out gold and silver rumored to be in the native cities. Next, they plundered these areas without regard to the natives, be they hospitable or warring towards them. The missionaries took some non-Christian paths also. Full of religious spirit, they too set out, but with a much different goal: to share their beliefs in the Christian way with the natives they encountered. It must be remembered that they traveled at the pleasure of the conquistadors. Viewed in hindsight, there has been tremendous criticism of the religious orders and their actions in support of the conquistadors as they set about to convert the natives in this new world. But the reality for the missionaries must have been very perplexing. The first complexity, surviving while in these unknown places. Also, they found themselves beholding to the conquistador leaders. Then, too, the violent nature of conquest, plus the brutal retaliations by the natives. Added to the mix, the horror of the natives' practice of human sacrifice and cannibalism. These two realities alone would have created a fervor all its own. The great center of this native world, Mexico City, received a full dose of these conquistadors' destructive nature. On his illegal voyage, greed-filled Hernando Cortez and his conquistadors marched ceaselessly in an effort to find gold, endeavoring to reach the fabled City of Gold. After a long, difficult, and dangerous journey, which included Cortez burning his ships in an effort to keep his men focused on their search for plunder, they reached and found what they sought. The fabled leader of the Aztecs, Montezuma, had great power, but he had many enemies among the other tribal leaders. Cortez, however, made alliances with Montezuma's enemies, and if they wouldn't cooperate, Cortez would fight them, using the better weapons he possessed to gain submission from tribe after tribe. As they got closer to the City of Gold, they prepared to fight, but to their surprise, Montezuma welcomed them into his world. They enjoyed the spoils of the remarkable city of great wealth and luxury, at the time the heart of Aztec civilization. However, this honeymoon with European warriors and Aztec hospitality came to an abrupt end. Some of the natives who distrusted the intentions of the Spaniards took action. They killed Montezuma and forced the Spaniards out of Mexico City. Cortez returned and laid siege on Mexico City. Inside the city, the natives made human sacrifices to their gods using captured Spanish soldiers as they fought back against the conquistadors. At the same time, a smallpox epidemic in the city took its toll on the natives. Dealing a destruction of horrific proportions, the conquistadors succeeded to break the backs of the Aztecs and laid waste to the magnificent City of Gold. The carnage of the siege had been total and complete. They leveled the once vibrant metropolis in the year 1524. Using the banner of blue and white with the cross as their flag, these European men fought for dominance of this continent. The ramifications of their actions has created a justified cynicism against these conquistadors as promoters of Jesus and Mary. But it is mitigated somewhat in light of the widespread native practices of cannibalism and human sacrifices, which the conquistadors would ban as they introduced Christian worship into these lands. In such a brutal struggle, might makes right. These soldiers of fortune did not find the streets lined with gold. In return for their service, they did receive land and slave ownership. This well overshadowed any shroud of Christian belief or values. What power could right the wrong they perpetuated in the name of the Virgin Mary? Chapter 12. An Apparition on a Mission. Today, in the recesses of the sprawling contemporary megapolis of Mexico City, 14 miles north of the center, stands a natural stone outcrop. This is where in the year 1531 an apparition took place, not long after Cortez's conquest. This is Nico Steves. I hope you enjoyed this installment. My new book, The Very Fine Light, is available on Amazon.com. Please feel free to contact me at nicosteves.com. That's Nikos Steves, Steves.com. If you like this episode, and for more, share them with friends, and consider William J. Walsh's book, Heaven's Bright Queen, Apparitions and Shrines of Heaven's Bright Queen. This is Nico Steves. Thank you. See you next time.